The fluorescent lights in my mother's kitchen have always buzzed at a frequency that makes my teeth ache. That particular Sunday evening, as I stood in the doorway holding a casserole dish that was still warm against my palms, I counted 3 full seconds before anyone acknowledged I had arrived. 3 seconds doesn't sound like much. But when you're standing in a room full of family members who have already settled into their conversations, their laughter, their inside jokes that somehow never include you, 3 seconds stretches into something cavernous. I watched my sister Meredith throw her head back at something my cousin Jared said. I watched my mother refill my brother Daniel's wine glass without him even asking. I watched my father pat my uncle on the shoulder with the easy affection of men who understand each other without trying. And I stood there, holding my casserole, feeling the heat leach through the ceramic and into my fingers, wondering if I had somehow become invisible, or if I had always been this way and simply hadn't noticed until now. "Oh, Helen." My mother finally turned, her smile arriving a half-beat too late to be genuine. "I didn't hear you come in. You can put that on the counter, I suppose. We already have the main dishes sorted." "I suppose." As if my contribution was an afterthought. As if the 3 hours I had spent perfecting the recipe, the one she had requested specifically, the one she said was essential for the gathering, meant nothing at all. I set the dish down next to the sink, not on the main table with the others, and I told myself it didn't matter. I had been telling myself that same lie for 32 years. The thing about being the family underdog is that no one ever officially assigns you the role. There's no ceremony, no announcement, no moment where everyone gathers to declare that you will be the one who gets overlooked, underestimated, and perpetually dismissed. It happens in increments. 1,000 small cuts that you convince yourself are accidents, coincidences, misunderstandings. Your mother forgets to mention your promotion at dinner but spends 20 minutes discussing your brother's new office furniture. Your father asks Meredith for investment advice but never once inquires about your freelance graphic design business, even though you've been running it for 6 years. Your siblings exchange glances when you speak, glances you're not supposed to notice, glances that say "there she goes again" without a single word being uttered. I noticed. I always noticed. But for most of my life, I convinced myself that the problem was me. That if I just tried harder, achieved more, became more palatable, more agreeable, more normal, they would finally see me the way they saw each other. That Sunday, as I drifted through the living room making small talk that no one particularly wanted to receive, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't anger, I had processed plenty of anger over the years. It was something quieter and far more devastating. It was clarity. I excused myself to use the restroom, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bathtub with my hands pressed against my temples. The wallpaper was the same floral pattern my mother had hung when I was 12. The soap dish still held the same brand of lavender soap that made me sneeze. Everything in this house remained frozen in amber while I had spent decades trying to evolve into someone worthy of belonging here. But the truth I had been running from for so long finally caught up to me in that small bathroom. I was never going to belong. Not because there was something fundamentally wrong with me, but because belonging had never actually been offered. The table had been set long before I was old enough to understand what exclusion meant, and no amount of achievement or accommodation was going to change my assigned seat. I stared at my reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror. The dark circles under my eyes had become permanent residents. My hair, unwashed for 3 days because I had been working around the clock on a project deadline, was pulled back in a knot that made my temples throb. I looked exhausted. I looked defeated. But somewhere beneath that exhausted exterior, there was a flicker of something else. Something that had been quietly growing in the background while my family had been busy dismissing me. Because here's what they didn't know, what none of them knew, while they were overlooking me at family gatherings, I had built a business worth nearly $500,000. It had started as a survival mechanism. When the loneliness became too heavy to carry, I would retreat to my home office and lose myself in color palettes and typography, in brand identities and marketing materials. While my siblings were out at brunches and parties, cultivating the social connections they seemed to accumulate effortlessly, I was hunched over my tablet at 2 in the morning, perfecting logos for startups that couldn't afford anyone else. Those startups had grown. They had become mid-sized companies, then corporations, and they remembered who had believed in them when they were nothing but an idea and a dream. They sent referrals. They offered retainers. They told their friends about the graphic designer who worked like her life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. I had never told my family about the growth. In the beginning, I didn't mention it because they never asked. Later, I stayed silent because I had learned that sharing my successes with them was like handing ammunition to people who didn't quite wish me well. My mother would find a way to diminish it. My father would change the subject. Meredith would make a joke about my unconventional career path that carried just enough sting to leave a mark. So I kept my success hidden, not out of shame but out of self-preservation. My work became my sanctuary, my therapy, my evidence that the world outside my family's walls valued something my blood relatives could not see. I dried my hands on the familiar towel, took a breath that felt like the first real one I'd taken all evening, and walked back out to join the gathering. But something had changed. For the first time, I wasn't walking out hoping to be included. I was walking out knowing that I didn't need their inclusion anymore. The months that followed that Sunday became a period of quiet reconstruction. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes and an office decorated with plants that somehow thrived under artificial light. She helped me understand that the weight I had been carrying wasn't weakness, it was the accumulated evidence of years spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. You've been operating under the assumption that if you just become good enough, they'll finally see your worth, she said during our third session. But Helen, you need to understand something important. Their inability to see you has never been about your inadequacy. It's about their limitations. I turned those words over in my mind like stones in a tumbler, smoothing the sharp edges until I could hold them without bleeding. Limitations. Not my limitations, theirs. My business continued to flourish. I hired my first full-time employee, a young designer named Marcus who had the same hungry look I remembered from my early years. I invested in better equipment. I raised my rates. I started turning down clients who wanted too much for too little because I finally understood that my time and talent were valuable, even if some people couldn't see it. I also started saying no. It began with small refusals. No, I couldn't host Thanksgiving this year. No, I wasn't available to help Meredith move apartments for the fourth time. No, I wouldn't be contributing money toward my parents' anniversary cruise because I had my own financial priorities to consider. Each no felt like swallowing broken glass at first. But the more I said it, the easier it became. And in the spaces created by those refusals, I discovered something I had almost forgotten existed: room to breathe. The shift in my family's attention was gradual but unmistakable. Word had started to circulate, as it does in families where everyone knows everyone's business even when you try to keep things private. My cousin Jared, who worked in marketing, had apparently mentioned to someone who mentioned to someone else that Helen had landed a major rebranding contract with a company everyone recognized. My mother started asking questions about my work that she had never asked before. My father mentioned, in an offhand way that was meant to seem casual, that he was proud of how things were going for me. At first, I wanted to believe it was genuine. I wanted to believe that they had finally seen me, that my success had become impossible to ignore and they were ready to welcome me into the fold I had always longed to join. But Dr. Patel had taught me to pay attention to patterns, not just moments. And the pattern that emerged was one I recognized from a lifetime of watching and waiting. They didn't want to know me. They wanted to know what I could offer them. The first explicit request came from Meredith, packaged in the kind of casual conversation that was designed to seem spontaneous. "I've been thinking about starting a lifestyle blog," she said, twirling pasta around her fork at a lunch she had unexpectedly invited me to. "You know, something with a really cohesive aesthetic. I figured since you do this kind of thing, maybe you could help me set it up. Not like a formal thing, obviously. Just, you know, sister helping sister." I felt my spine stiffen slightly, but I kept my face pleasant. "What kind of help are you thinking?" "Just the basics. Logo, color scheme, maybe some templates for posts. Shouldn't take you more than a few hours, right?" A few hours. As if the work I did could be reduced to something that barely required effort. As if the years I had spent honing my craft were insignificant compared to her casual interest in influencer culture. "I'm pretty swamped right now," I said carefully. "But I could refer you to someone who might have availability." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or the first hint of irritation. "I just thought it would be easier to keep it in the family. Blood is thicker than water, right?" There it was. The phrase I had heard deployed 1,000 times throughout my life, always wielded when someone wanted something from me that they weren't willing to pay for, work for, or reciprocate. I set down my fork. "I appreciate that sentiment. But this is how I make my living. I can't do professional work for free, even for family." Meredith's expression hardened almost imperceptibly before resetting to neutrality. "Of course. I understand completely. It was just a thought." But her understanding was thin as tissue paper, and when we parted ways that afternoon, I could feel the new tension between us like static electricity before a storm. The requests kept coming after that, each one wrapped in different packaging but all containing the same essential message: what you have should be ours. My brother Daniel called to discuss a business opportunity that, upon investigation, turned out to be a request for me to invest $20,000 in his friend's restaurant venture, an investment that would benefit him through a finder's fee he conveniently failed to mention until I asked directly. My mother suggested I renovate my spare room into a guest suite since it would be so nice to have somewhere comfortable to stay when we visit. She neglected to mention that she and my father were considering selling their house and would need temporary housing during the transition. My father began dropping hints about retirement planning, about how he wished he had more security, about how families used to take care of their elders in ways that modern society had sadly abandoned. Every conversation began to feel like a chess game where I was constantly defending against moves I couldn't quite see until they were upon me. And through it all, there was a veneer of sweetness, of familial concern, of "we're only saying this because we love you" that made questioning their motives feel like ingratitude. The toxic positivity was perhaps the hardest weapon to defend against. When I declined Daniel's investment opportunity, my mother called to express concern about my inability to trust family. "I just worry about you, Helen. You've always been so independent, but sometimes that can become isolation. We're your family. We only want what's best for you." When I explained that I couldn't offer free design work to every relative who asked, my father sent a carefully worded email about the importance of generosity and how success means nothing without people to share it with. When I set limits around my time and money, Meredith posted something on social media about how some people forget where they came from once they think they're too good for everyone else, a passive-aggressive volley that she could plausibly deny was about me but that everyone who mattered knew exactly whom it was addressing. They had always had a language for what I now understood was manipulation. It was the language of family, of obligation, of blood and belonging. And for so long, I had been fluent in it, accepting every guilt trip as my due, every request as my responsibility, every criticism as evidence of my own failure to be enough. But I was learning a new language now. The language of boundaries. It was the bank statements that finally crystallized everything. I had been going through old files, organizing my financial records for tax season, when I found a folder I had forgotten existed. Inside were documents from nearly 8 years ago, when I had lent my parents money to help with what they described as a temporary cash flow problem. $12,000. I had been struggling back then, barely keeping my business afloat, but they had made it sound urgent, critical, a matter of preventing foreclosure on the house I had grown up in. I had emptied my savings account and handed over the check without a second thought because that's what family did. They had never paid it back. Not a single dollar. And somehow, in the chaos of the years that followed, I had stopped expecting them to. I had written it off as a gift in my mind, a sacrifice I had made for people I loved, even if they hadn't loved me in quite the same way. But seeing that bank statement, the record of that transaction, forced me to confront what I had been avoiding. This pattern had existed long before my success became visible. They had always taken from me. The only thing that had changed was the scale of what they now wanted to take. I started keeping records. Not out of paranoia but out of a need to document reality as it actually was, rather than the version my family presented as truth. I created a spreadsheet tracking every request for money, time, or resources that had come my way over the past 2 years. The numbers were staggering. If I had fulfilled every request, I would have donated over $60,000 in free labor and direct financial assistance. I would have sacrificed countless hours that were supposed to be dedicated to my business, my health, my life. I requested credit reports and discovered that my father had, at some point, co-signed a loan using information that must have been obtained from documents I had trusted my parents to keep safe. The loan had gone into default. My credit score had suffered consequences I had attributed to a bank error until I saw the evidence laid out before me. I pulled records from my business accounts and found donations I didn't remember making to charities I had never heard of, charities that, upon further research, turned out to be linked to fundraisers my mother had volunteered me for without my knowledge. Each piece of evidence was a small cut, but collectively, they told a story I could no longer deny. My family had not merely overlooked me. They had systematically extracted value from me while making me believe I was the one who was failing to give enough. Dr. Patel listened as I laid out the evidence during our sessions, her expression careful and compassionate. "How does it feel to see this clearly?" she asked. I considered the question seriously before answering. "It feels terrible," I admitted. "But it also feels like waking up. Like I've been walking through fog and suddenly the air is clear enough to see the path." "What do you want to do with this clarity?" "I want to stop being anyone's bank account or resource well. I want to be a person, not a supply line." "And what would that require?" I knew the answer before she finished asking. It would require confrontation. It would require holding up a mirror and refusing to look away, even when the reflection was painful for everyone involved. It would require telling the truth. The family meeting was my mother's idea, though I doubt she would have suggested it if she had known what I was planning to bring. She had framed it as an opportunity for reconnection, a chance to clear the air about what she vaguely described as recent tensions. The subtext was clear: Helen was being difficult, and a family intervention was needed to bring her back into the fold. I arrived at my parents' house with a folder of documents and a calm that I had cultivated through weeks of therapy and sleepless nights. My hands weren't shaking. My voice wouldn't break. I had practiced this moment so many times in my mind that it felt almost scripted, though I knew the reality would be messier than any rehearsal. Everyone was already there when I walked in. My parents sat on the living room sofa like judges presiding over a court they had convened. Meredith had claimed the armchair by the window, her legs crossed in a posture of cultivated disinterest. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, projecting the image of someone too busy and important to sit. "Helen." My mother's voice carried the warmth of forced hospitality. "We're so glad you came. We've all been worried about you lately." I settled into the remaining chair, placing my folder on my lap with deliberate care. "I appreciate the concern. But I don't think worry is the right word for what's been happening." My father shifted slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that I've been doing some thinking. And some research." I opened the folder and removed the first document, the bank statement from 8 years ago. "Do you remember this?" My mother glanced at the paper without taking it. "I don't understand what you're trying to do here, Helen." "I'm trying to understand why you never paid back the $12,000 I lent you. The money you said was urgent. The money that emptied my savings when I could barely afford rent." Silence. The kind of silence that falls when no one in the room expected to be confronted with their own history. "That was a long time ago," my father said finally. "We were going through a difficult period. We thought." "You thought what?" "That I wouldn't remember? That I wouldn't notice?" I pulled out the next document, the credit report showing the unauthorized loan. "Did you also think I wouldn't notice that my credit score was damaged by a loan I never consented to?" My mother's face went pale. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake. I have the records. I have proof that someone used my information to secure a loan that was never repaid." I looked directly at my father. "I've traced it back. I know what happened." Daniel pushed off from the doorframe, his expression suddenly alert. "Helen, this is getting ridiculous. You're accusing our parents of, what, exactly?" "I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm stating facts. Facts that I have documentation for. I turned to Meredith. Just like I have documentation of the 3 times you used my business discount codes to make purchases for yourself without asking. And the referral fee you collected last year for introducing a client to me, a fee I never saw a penny of. Meredith's carefully constructed disinterest crumbled. That was a misunderstanding. It's always a misunderstanding, isn't it? Or a difficult period. Or a one-time thing that somehow keeps happening over and over again. I closed the folder and set it on the coffee table between us. I've been running the numbers. Do you want to know what I've given this family over the past decade? In money, in time, in free work, in resources? It's over $90,000. And what have I received in return? No one answered. But then, I hadn't expected them to. I've received guilt trips when I couldn't give more. Criticism when I tried to set limits. Exclusion from conversations that I was apparently never important enough to join. And the constant, unrelenting message that no matter what I achieved, I would never be quite good enough to be treated as an equal. My mother's eyes were wet, but I had seen those tears before. They were strategic tears, tears designed to redirect the conversation from accountability to comfort. I can't believe you would say these things to us. After everything we've done for you. What have you done for me? The question was genuine. I wanted to know. Tell me specifically. What support have you provided that wasn't ultimately about what I could provide in return? The silence stretched. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street, its engine humming through the walls. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. My family sat frozen in their positions, caught in a moment of exposure they had never expected to face. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was quieter now, stripped of the authority he usually projected. You've always been difficult to understand, Helen. We tried to include you. We tried to support you. But you were always off doing your own thing, in your own world. Being independent isn't the same as being unavailable. I was here. I was always here, ready to be part of this family. But every time I showed up, I was invisible until someone needed something from me. I stood slowly, gathering my folder. I'm not angry anymore. I was angry for a long time, but that's past. Now I'm just clear. Crystal clear about what this relationship has actually been. What are you saying? Meredith's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that might have been fear. I'm saying that I'm done. Not done with family entirely, I'm not cutting anyone off forever. But I'm done being the open tap that everyone expects to flow indefinitely. From now on, any financial requests go through a formal process. Any requests for my professional services get the same rates I charge paying clients. And any attempt to guilt me, manipulate me, or use family loyalty as a weapon will be the end of that particular conversation. My mother stood abruptly. You can't just, this isn't how family works, Helen. Blood is thicker than water. That means something. It means we take care of each other, even when it's hard. The full quote, I said calmly, is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. And I'm choosing now. I'm choosing to no longer accept treatment that I would never tolerate from a stranger just because it comes from people I'm related to. I walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. I love you all. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean allowing myself to be used. And self-respect means more to me now than your approval ever could. No one followed me to my car. No one called out to stop me. But as I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my mother watching from the living room window, her figure frozen behind the glass like a portrait from another era. The silence that followed the family meeting lasted 17 days. 17 days during which my phone remained conspicuously free of the usual group texts and casual requests. 17 days during which I waited for the explosion of anger, the cascade of guilt, the collective effort to bring the wayward daughter back into line. It didn't come. What came instead was something I hadn't anticipated, individual approaches, carefully calibrated to seem sincere. My father called first. His voice was subdued, almost humble. "I've been thinking about what you said. About the loan. I should have told you. I should have asked." "Yes. You should have." I was scared. We were in trouble, and I panicked, and I made a decision I'm not proud of. "I'm sorry, Helen. Genuinely sorry." It was more than I had expected. More than he had ever offered before. But I had learned something important in therapy. Apologies that come only after exposure are not the same as apologies that come from genuine accountability. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "But apologies are about actions as much as words. I need to see things change, not just hear that you wish they were different." "I understand. Whatever it takes." We ended the call on uncertain terms. Progress, perhaps, but fragile. The kind of progress that could collapse at the first sign of pressure. My mother took a different approach. She sent a long email, uncharacteristic for her, as she usually preferred the phone where emotion could be leveraged more effectively. The email was a meditation on motherhood, on the sacrifices she had made, on how much she had always wanted the best for all her children. It acknowledged, in vague terms, that perhaps she hadn't always expressed her love in ways I could understand. It asked for patience. It asked for grace. It did not address a single specific thing I had raised at the family meeting. I read it 3 times before responding with a simple message: "I received your email. I'm processing it. I hope we can have a more specific conversation when you're ready." Her reply was a single line: "I'm always ready to talk." But ready to talk and ready to change were different things entirely. Meredith surprised me most. 3 weeks after the meeting, she showed up at my office unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression I had never seen on her face before: humility. "I rehearsed what I wanted to say," she admitted, settling into the chair across from my desk. "But it all sounds stupid now that I'm here." "Just say it anyway." She took a breath. "I was jealous of you. I'd been jealous of you for years, and I turned that jealousy into something ugly. Into dismissing you, minimizing you, taking advantage of you. Because if I could prove you weren't as special as everyone was starting to realize, maybe I could feel better about my own choices." I studied her face, searching for the performance, the manipulation. But what I saw instead was something raw, the kind of vulnerability that comes with genuine admission. "What specifically were you jealous of?" "That you built something real. That you made it on your own terms. That you didn't need anyone's approval to become who you are." She laughed, but it was hollow. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone expected. The pretty one. The social one. The one who fits in. And you just didn't care. You became yourself anyway." "I cared," I corrected gently. "I cared enormously. I just learned to stop showing it because showing it only gave people weapons." Meredith nodded slowly. "I was one of those people. And I'm sorry." "What are you going to do about it?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sorry is a start, but it's not an end point. What actions are you going to take to make this right? Are you going to stop talking about me behind my back? Are you going to repay the things you took? Are you going to treat me as an equal in family settings instead of the target of inside jokes?" For a moment, I thought she might get defensive. The old Meredith certainly would have. But this Meredith, whoever she was becoming, simply nodded again. "All of it. I'm going to do all of it. And if I slip, I want you to call me out. Not in anger, but in truth. Like you did at the meeting." "I can do that." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 sisters who had spent decades as strangers learning what it might mean to actually know each other. "I also want to pay for your design services," Meredith added. "For the blog thing. At your full rate. If you're still willing to work with me after everything." I considered the offer. Part of me wanted to decline, to keep the boundary clear, to avoid any entanglement that might revert to old patterns. But another part, the part that was learning to trust again, cautiously and incrementally, recognized this as a genuine attempt to change the dynamic. I'll send you a proposal, I said finally. Professional terms. And if at any point it starts to feel like old patterns are emerging, I reserve the right to end the engagement. Fair. Meredith left an hour later, and I sat alone in my office, watching the afternoon light slant through the windows. Something had shifted. Not completely, not in a way that erased the past or guaranteed the future. But something real, nonetheless. The year that followed became a kind of experiment in what was possible when old patterns were interrupted. My father made payments. Small, consistent payments toward the loan he had taken in my name. He set up automatic transfers, $50 a week, and never missed a single one. The debt wouldn't be cleared for years at that rate, but the gesture mattered more than the math. My mother remained the hardest case. She oscillated between seeming growth and old habits, sometimes within the same conversation. But I noticed that the guilt trips became less frequent. The requests became more direct. And occasionally, rarely, but significantly, she would ask about my life without immediately redirecting the conversation to someone else. Daniel never apologized. He simply reduced contact, which was its own form of answer. We saw each other at holiday gatherings, exchanged pleasantries, and kept a careful distance that seemed to work for both of us. Some relationships, I learned, are not meant to be healed. They are meant to be managed. Meredith became something approaching an actual friend. The blog project went well, professionally, cleanly, with none of the old exploitation dynamics. When it was finished, she paid on time and in full. And slowly, tentatively, we began to build something that resembled sisterhood rather than competition. My business, meanwhile, continued to grow. I hired 2 more designers, expanded into web development, and started teaching workshops on creative entrepreneurship. The same work that had once been my escape became my public identity, not a secret I was hiding from my family but a source of pride I could claim openly. I was invited to speak at a design conference in Chicago. 1,200 people in the audience. Standing ovation at the end. My face on a banner at the entrance to the convention hall. Success, visible and undeniable, that no one could dismiss or diminish. My mother texted me a picture of the banner. Someone had sent it to her. Proud of you, she wrote. Just 2 words. But from her, from us, it was everything. Sleep became easier. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. The anxiety that used to keep me up at night, the endless replaying of slights, the anticipation of the next request, the gnawing sense that I would never be enough, began to fade. In its place came something I had rarely experienced, peace. The boundaries I had set were not walls designed to punish. They were structures designed to protect, to create a space where I could exist as myself, valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. And within those boundaries, something unexpected happened. My family began to see me. Actually see me. Not as a resource, not as an outsider, but as a person with her own gravity, her own worth, her own right to be treated with dignity. Not everyone met me there. Some relationships remained strained, some dynamics irreparably broken. But the relationships that grew within those boundaries became more authentic than anything I had experienced before. Quality over quantity. Depth over performance. I sleep well now. I sleep without the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on my chest. I sleep knowing that my value is not contingent on what I give away but on who I am, on the work I do, the life I've built, the person I've become through struggle and resilience. The business is worth over $2 million now. I have a team of 7. I have clients across 6 countries. I have a home I bought with my own money, furnished with choices that reflect my taste rather than anyone else's expectations. I have friends who chose me, and family members who learned to choose me too. But more than any of that, I have myself. The self I spent 32 years suppressing in service of belonging that was never truly offered. The self that built something real while the world dismissed me as strange, as difficult, as not quite fitting in. The self that finally understood that fitting in was never the goal, being whole was. The last time I visited my parents' house, my casserole went on the main table. My mother asked me about the conference. My father showed me an article about one of my clients, beaming with the pride he once reserved for everyone else's children. Meredith sat next to me, not across from me, and when she made a joke, it was with me rather than at my expense. It wasn't perfect. Families rarely are. But it was real in a way that the old version never could have been. Real because it was built on truth rather than obligation. Real because I had stopped accepting treatment I didn't deserve and started requiring the respect I had always merited. I think sometimes about the woman I used to be. The one standing in the doorway with a casserole, invisible and aching, counting seconds of silence like marks against her worth. I want to go back and tell her that everything she feared was true, but that knowing it, facing it, and moving through it was the only path to freedom. The world doesn't always reward your struggles with immediate success. Sometimes the tunnel is longer than you expected. Sometimes the darkness feels permanent. But every step forward, every small act of self-advocacy, every boundary set and held, every moment of choosing your own dignity over someone else's comfort, is a step toward light. Every great success starts with a struggle. Mine started in a bathroom with floral wallpaper, staring at my exhausted reflection and finally seeing clearly. It continued through therapy sessions and spreadsheets, through confrontations and consequences, through relationships that reformed and some that faded away. And it culminated not in a single triumphant moment but in the quiet, accumulated peace of nights spent sleeping soundly, knowing I am enough exactly as I am. If you are standing in a doorway right now, holding your own casserole, counting the seconds of silence and wondering what is wrong with you, please know that nothing is wrong with you. The problem is not your worth. The problem is the people who cannot see it. And the solution is not to shrink yourself smaller until you fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. The solution is to build your own space, set your own terms, and invite in only those who are willing to meet you there. It will be hard. It will be lonely sometimes. There will be moments when the old voices creep back in, whispering that you are asking for too much, that you are being unreasonable, that blood should mean something more than accountability and respect. But keep going. Build your thing. Set your boundaries. Gather your evidence. Speak your truth. And one day, maybe sooner than you expect, maybe later than you hope, but inevitably if you stay the course, you will sleep just fine too.